much to digest as the Premier-designate navigates his way through week number 1 at the helm of the PC party in Alberta. And joining our Tuesday politics panel tonight, Sheila Pratt from the Edmonton Journal. Duane Bratt is chair and a professor in the Department of Policy Studies at Mount Royal University. And Rob Breckenridge, host with the Chorus Radio Network. Good evening, folks. Oh, goodness gracious. I wish we had a whole show to digest this particular topic tonight. Sheila, I want to start with you. Let's look first at the leadership outcome, the results, the Prentice speech. What kind of a statement does all that make?
Well, it's very interesting. I think one of the things everyone has to look at, first of all, is just the numbers of ballots cast, 23,000 or so, which is such a contrast with the 72-odd thousand in the Redford leadership race and over 144,000 in the 2006 Stelmach race. You have to be struck by that number. It is so low. I mean, granted, there were probably more memberships sold than that, but that's who came out to vote and managed to vote. And it's pretty small, and I think one thing comes out of this is probably Jim Prentice has a better idea of the work he needs to do to rebuild the party, looking at numbers like that. And I think if I was the Wild Rose and opposition parties, I'd be looking at that number and thinking, there's openings here.
Now, Duane, you were in the room Saturday night. There didn't appear to be much of a crowd. Was it, in fact, a coronation kind of evening?
It wasn't just a low turnout who voted, it was a low turnout on who showed up. There was about 350 people in that room, in a very large room, and most of those were people that had to be there. MLAs, their executive assistant, their spouse, media, and once the announcement was over, and once Prentice gave his speech, it emptied very quickly after. I've been at other elections and other leadership races, and there's more of a celebration. This was, we're just happy, it's over, let's move on to something else now. It was a very somber affair.
Rob, the outcome didn't come as much of a surprise to many Albertans, but as we look back over the PC leadership race, how much was the party, the government for that matter, marching to the Jim Prentice drum all through the summer?
It all seemed to be about, everything was on hold, basically, until Jim could take over. So it was by design. They didn't want much of a race. I don't think they wanted the wild card of all these new people coming to the party, and then it, kind of gets out of their control. They wanted it this way. It was by design. It was all about coordinating Jim Prentice. The other two, and I don't think they were there just to play along and make it look like a race. I think legitimately Thomas Lukaszuk especially, and Rick McIver too, I think they were trying. But as we saw with the final result, they didn't really get much traction at all. I mean, it was not even close. Although there were some, some questions about irregularities in the vote itself. I don't think it was such a wide margin that probably wouldn't have affected the outcome in any significant way. So this was all by design. It was all about the coronation that I think they would have just as soon got out of the way the moment Jim Prentice said yes to running.
Well, and Sheila's at the helm now. A transition team has been named, and a whole lot of speculation around who will be appointed to cabinet. Who do you think he'll be looking to fill in some of those key roles? And obviously, there's a lot of talk around former Edmonton Mayor Stephen Mandel.
Yes, Mandel is certainly front and center in this because he would be one way to show a new face, and he's promised new government. This is a new government, and that's his challenge. How do you do that with a caucus full of everybody that was from the Redford era? So Mandel would be a new face, especially in urban and in Edmonton, where Jim Prentice possibly doesn't have the same traction that he does in Calgary. So it could work for him, though there's some risk in being the first time out to actually appoint people without having them elected. But he faces a very difficult task because there are many heavy hitters in the party that he has to decide whether to keep or not. Mandel's in focus, but what's he going to do with Doug Horner, Fred Horn, Dave Hancock? These are all people associated with the previous regime that he wants to distance himself from. So he's going to face some pretty tough questions and tough decisions, I think.
And Duane, I guess there is a reason why so many members of the PC caucus worked their hind ends off in promoting the Prentice campaign over the summer months. How nervous are many of those cabinet ministers now?
They should all be nervous. Prentice has clearly said two things. One is he wants a smaller cabinet, and the other is he wants some new people in that cabinet. So existing cabinet ministers should start packing their bags, and backbench members, don't be getting your hopes up that you're going to be elevated into cabinet. And so at the end of a leadership race, Prentice had two major challenges. Challenge one is rebuild trust with Albertans, and the other challenge is to reunite the party. It's going to be difficult to do both of those in his cabinet selections. If he wants to reunite the party, it's going to be the same cast of characters, and that won't help build trust with Albertans. If he builds trust with Albertans by bringing in new members, that's going to alienate some of the existing members. So that's the delicate dance that he's got to do over the next couple days.
And Rob, a non-elected premier, what does he risk most if he brings outsiders in, non-elected cabinet ministers?
Yeah, I think he's got to be careful with how far he pushes that. Now, I mean, technically or legally speaking, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think Albertans are not used to seeing that. And so I think it would send a concerning message. And so I think he's going to have to walk a fine line there. The other interesting element is, I mean, he seems awfully fond of Stephen Mandel. I don't know that everyone in caucus necessarily feels the same way about Stephen Mandel. When he was mayor of Edmonton, he certainly had some harsh criticism for the government. I wonder if some of those old wounds still exist. So that could add another element to the equation.
I think that is an interesting issue around Mandel. It's not a clear win. There is a little bit of risk to it. I mean, all those people sat in caucus doing all the hard work, and then Mandel would walk in and get a position, and people are talking deputy premier, for heaven's sakes. I think that might create some angst in the backbench that have hung in there in the worst of times of living through Alison Redford. So he's going to have to be a very skilled consensus builder, Jim Prentice, if he's going to be doing, bold moves like that.
Okay, let's talk by-elections now. Sheila, how much effort do you expect the opposition parties to put into a fight with Jim Prentice come by-election time?
Oh, I think this is their big moment. I mean, as Dwayne and Rob will say, those margins in Calgary were way less in the last election, and they were not landslide victories in any of those seats. So, some of them would be the opposition will certainly see an opening there to throw everything at it. And you've already got the Alberta Party leader announcing an elbow, and the Wildrose will put a lot into whoever trying to beat Prentice for sure.
Well, and Dwayne, Alberta Party even stealing a little bit of thunder today with leader Greg Clark announcing his campaign team, which surprisingly enough, maybe to some, includes a certain name in Stephen Carter. How much of a fight does Jim Prentice have facing him?
Well, Jim Prentice is not going to run in Calgary Elbow. I can't see the PCs holding on to Elbow. There was so much, I mean, if you want to talk about the epicenter of people disgusted with Alison Redford, it is in her own riding. You compound that with the aftermath of the flood, and it's going to be pretty tough for the PCs to win it. I think this is the best chance the Alberta Party has ever had and may ever have. And I can see them doing great damage in this riding and perhaps even winning it.
And Rob, what do you see Wildrose, NDP, Liberals? How do you see them approaching it?
Yeah, I think the Wildrose have a pretty good shot at winning Calgary Elbow, and that's going to be hotly contested. Danielle Smith has already said that there's going to be no easy ride for Jim Prentice. So wherever he ends up running, they're going to be there, and whatever other by-elections happen to come about, maybe in Edmonton as well, I think they're all going to be hotly contested. I think the likelihood that Jim Prentice is going to run in Northwest Calgary and Neil Brown's riding, that's where he lives. I think Neil Brown's prepared to step aside. That seems to be the likely scenario. And I think Prentice would probably have, it won't be an easy time, but I think it's pretty likely that he'll get a seat. And the other thing is, I mean, they're going to want to do this quickly because, to ensure that he has a seat, that he's there in the legislature once that resumes, because once they start tabling his legislation, his signature bills 1 and 2 and 3, if he's not there, that's going to look bad.
Yeah,
there's going to be as many as 5 or 6 simultaneous by-elections. And I agree with Rob. I think Jim Prentice will be bruised, but I think he'll win it. But the others, and these are all PC seats formerly held by the PC party, they're not going to run the table. In fact, they could end up with a situation of 5 seats and only winning 1, maybe 2 of them.
Right.
And that's the danger they've got.
I agree. It's very risky. And let's also remember they don't have a lot of money right now to be running these by-elections where the Wildrose has a pretty big treasury backed up. So.
Well, Jim Prentice, though, isn't he a fundraising case?
He's supposed to be the fundraiser, but they've pulled a lot of money out of people already. So.
True enough. Okay, time for a break. Up next, Jim Prentice as Premier, his style, his mandate, and recapturing the trust of Albertans. More from our politics panel after the break.